Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So just to make sure you're in the right room, this is Blue Team, Public Works. You were with Cody this morning. Yes? Okay, great. Okay, so we will be discussing the ISPA Public Works tool. And very much within the social protection frame. So I'm going to quickly go over the agenda, what I would like to accomplish in this session. This is the introductory session, which will then be followed by a session by Barnabas Hachi, who you've met from Tanzania, who will be covering more details of how the ISPA Public Works tool was applied in a country. And then we will break for coffee, and we will come back to the clinic, which will allow you to do your hands-on exercise to see that you have a chance to do it yourself. Oh, sorry. So in terms of the agenda, I wanted to first start by just introducing ourselves, and we'll do that in a second. Talk about how public works fits in as part of social protection, or why do we talk about public works for social protection. We will also look at the tool itself, what is contained in the ISPA tool. And if we have time, we'll cover these complementarities between public employment programs and social protection. And then hopefully we'll have enough time for questions and answers. So let me start by introducing Barnabas. And Barnabas, I let you.
Yeah, my name is Barnabas Jachi. I'm from Tanzania, East Africa. In Tanzania, we have a very big program, Productive Social Safety Net, which encompass cash transfer, conditional cash transfer, and public works and livelihood. And we are one of the few countries in Africa whom we applied the ISPA tool in the assessment of public works. So I'm going to take you through the whole assessment process, but I've been working in TASAF for the last 15 years. Professionally, I'm an engineer, and so I've been responsible for public works all over. So whenever I sleep, I wake up every day, public works. Thank you.
Okay, so I myself, Mito Tsukamoto. I have been with the ILO since about 1989, working in different aspects, but for the last, I'd say about 15 years, I've worked on public works. I work in a program called the Employment Intensive Investment Program, which is a program that looks at public works, not just in terms of social protection, but we also work on infrastructure investments, right? So we look at how to look at public investments and be able to create jobs through those public investments. I was one of the lucky ones because I have seen the whole process of the ISPA tool creation from the beginning until today. So I was part of the design team and then have continued on with the ILO leading the working group of the ISPA Public Works tool. It's not just Barnabas and I. Of course, there's many others who are not present here. But these different partners that you see on the screen are the ones that were very much involved in the development and design of the tool. We have continued the discussions and also in terms of the applications in different countries, we've actually continued to work with many of these same partners. Maybe in some cases there have been staff changes, but in terms of the organizations, we are still continuing to work with all of these agencies in one way or the other. So what do I mean by public works as social protection? So if we look at what are some of the, how are public works actually contributing to social protection? They're very much about income, right? That's what we're looking for in social protection, is to ensure that people throughout their life cycle have income security. We're also, and that income can be in different forms. It can be cash, wages, it can be in kind, it can also be in food or cereal. And it's about generating employment, right? In many cases, public works requires some sort of manual labor, which will then be provided with some sort of in-kind cash or cash transfer or wage. But it's also about creating a public good. So we're talking about community infrastructures, we're talking about irrigation systems, we're talking about water and soil conservation schemes. So there's many different types of activities that can be included in what we call public works. So it's a good or a service that's provided for the public. There's also issues around maintenance of those works, so whether they be the community works or the maintenance of roads or bridges, for example. And it's also about providing useful and needed services. So in many countries, in many villages, there's certain needs that the community may have, which may not necessarily have to do with infrastructure. It may be a need for early childhood development. It may be a need for supporting health services. So there's many different types of activities also which are of the social services kind. We are talking about public works, and in many existing programs already, we are talking about public works where we're talking about community participation. So it's local level participation, not just in the implementation of the works. We're talking about real community-based participation from the design of a program, prioritization of the infrastructure or the service that is needed, all the way through monitoring and evaluation in many cases. And it can also be programs which support the poor or in relation to food insecurity or water insecurity. The main objective, oftentimes when we talk about public works for social protection, we're talking about a main objective of income security, so that is your main objective. And then, of course, with that, you have secondary and tertiary objectives, which can be the employment creation or the asset or service that's created. And you'll understand why I'm mentioning this now. It will come again in the following slide. So what is the spectrum of public works? So I just introduced public works within social protection. But if we talk about public works in large, there's a wide spectrum of these. They can go from anything from emergency employment schemes. So if you have a natural disaster, or in terms of conflict, oftentimes you hear about these emergency schemes. But it can go to the other extreme, which is programs like employment guarantee schemes. Some governments have national employment guarantee schemes. But at the same time, if we go beyond the social protection realm, we also have existing public works, right? Each of your countries have a Ministry of Public Works or a Department of Transport or Public Works that's actually creating infrastructure. That's also public works. And that's another source of fund which can also create employment, income, and assets. So some agencies, like in the case of the ILO, we actually cover that spectrum where we're working both on the social protection side, but we're also working on the investment. Other agencies like the World Bank, of course, cover both sides, but there might be two departments. So it depends on the agency and how they're structured, but Public Works has many, many different facets. There are programs which are national, so not donor-funded projects. We're talking about nationally funded public employment programs. And we also have universal employment guarantees. So like the case of India, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, which is a guarantee by law. Oftentimes when we talk about public works, there are many objectives and there may be many trade-offs. And I highlight that because I think it's very important to consider that when you're considering the design of a program, that there are many objectives and there are many facets of the trade-offs that you may have to decide on, and it's very important to decide that at the design of a program. And of course, the sources of funding. There's many different sources of funding, right? You might have social funds, you might have money coming from the environmental sector, you might have funding from the social development sector, or infrastructure sector, but many different sources of funds. And I think it's important to just understand that there's a wide gamut of public work programs. In terms of this image, I wanted to highlight sort of the public works typology. This is something that was also discussed within the ISPA team, the ISPA development partners, to agree that there are these multiple objectives and that we do have these multiple trade-offs. So I'm just going to give you, highlight some examples. If we look at the social protection objective, right? Oftentimes we're talking about pension, health, but within that you may also have public works, which are especially addressed to those who are in the active age, right? Who are physically able to work. But the main objective of social protection, I think we would all agree, is the income security during the life cycle of an individual. At the same time, you might have employment programs, which may be active labor market policy oriented. They may be counter-cyclical problems because programs which are addressing a crisis or some sort of conflict or some sort of issue that needs to be addressed through employment. And just one example is the example of NREGA, which is, and I'll explain more about these programs in a bit, but this is a program that oftentimes is referred to as an public employment program. And at the same time, sometimes people will refer to NREGA as a social protection program because they are meeting these two objectives of employment and income security. But there are trade-offs, so we need to be aware of them. So the focus can be on employment impact and income security, but without compromising the quality of the infrastructure. And as some of you may know, NREGA in the past has had a lot of issues around the quality of the assets. I'm glad to say that now there has been a huge effort to develop what they call barefoot technicians training to help participants of the program be able to also supervise the quality of the assets. So these programs evolve. Then you might have a program which is the social protection objective, and at the same time is overlapping with the objective of infrastructure or asset development or services. And in the case of the Ethiopian Productive Safety Net program, and I'll also go into that in a bit, it's a program that actually looks at, it's a program that actually combines two programs of public works with cash, but actually creates a synergy between the two, and it's a program that focuses on environmental works. And here it really is about addressing the vulnerable, providing them with income security, and yet at the same time providing this creation of natural assets. So the focus here is multi-sectoral investment with basic income security, and I think the issue there is looking at the conditions of work, the issues around employment. In the case of employment objective with infrastructure assets objective, there are many programs like the largest rural roads program in India, or the South African Expanded Public Works Program, which is looking at a sectoral approach, but they have an objective, and their objective may be to create 100 kilometers of road. That's their main objective. And a secondary objective may be the employment or the income security. And again, these types of programs can have, address issues around sectoral investments and also address the issue of employment, but we need to ensure that we're also not compromising the quality of investment in human capital. So in terms of capacity building. So for example, in the case of South Africa, there has been a strengthened effort to ensure a major investment in the capacity development of many of the existing programs. So just more in detail about these programs. So this program here, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, many of you may be familiar with the program already. It's a national program. It's a program that was enacted in law in 2005. It's a program that actually guarantees 100 days of employment to every household in the rural area. So if I live in the rural area, I have the right to request 100 days of employment. And it's guaranteed by law, which also means that when government changes, we were having this discussion over lunch, the law is there. So even if government changes, these programs do not change. It's a program that in 2010-11 was having an impact of 55 million beneficiaries. And again, it can be considered, it's an employment program because wages are being paid. There is a contractual employer-employee relationship. But at the same time, for quite a long time, it was considered a social protection program. Why? Because in many cases, it was also extending social protection in a country where universal social protection does not exist. In the case of the Productive Safety Net program, this is a program in Ethiopia. So I was explaining earlier that it's a program that's a hybrid because it actually links public works with social protection. It's also a program that the focus has been very much on food insecurity. So it started as a donor-funded program, where, as you know, with food insecurity in Ethiopia, many donors were providing support, financial support. And then at some point, PSNP was designed in such a way that it was actually using that multi-donor support, multi-donor trust fund, with also a contribution from the government to make this a nationally sustainable program. And here you have a program that's now in its phase 4, running between 2014, 2020. So you see the scalability is there. These are programs that have been around for quite some time. And it's also a program, as I was saying earlier, that you could be, I'm of the active age, and I want to work. So I have the right to work. I can come and ask for work. At the point where, say, I'm maternity, or if I'm sick and I have an accident, I'm also covered because I fall into the social protection part of the program, which ensures that I have some sort of unemployment insurance or some sort of maternity insurance while I'm not working. And then once I'm able to go back to work, I'm allowed back into the program. So it was a nice program which looks at food security, which is addressing a very major issue and problem in Ethiopia, through this program that actually creates this bridge between employment and social protection. Then the third program I want to highlight is the South African Expanded Public Works Program. This program has been around since about, I think it was 2003. It's a program that is now in its third phase that goes up to 2019, and it has a target of 6 million working opportunities. And the interesting thing about the South African program is that it's multi-sectoral. So it's a national public employment program, public works program, that has different sectors. So it's working with the infrastructure sector, it's working with the environmental sector, it's working with the social services, social development sector, and then what they call non-state actors. So here we have a program that's nationally driven, has statistics that go up and down, so you're able to also gather data at different levels, very much implemented on the ground, but originally started as I would say more of an infrastructure investment or environmental investment. It was a sectoral investment program, which is now tried to address other issues as secondary objectives, whether it's employment or income security. It also targets, they have very specific targets. They target women, youth, and disabled persons. So you will find disabled persons who are also working on the program, helping other disabled people, or in some cases doing other types of activities which they're physically able to do. Then you have these other programs like the Jefes y Jefas de Hogar Desocupado in Argentina. So this was a program back in 2003. It had a target of about 2 million. So it's to say that these programs have been around for quite a while. And you have more recent programs like the Umerenge program in Rwanda, which has been created also learning from some of the other existing national public employment programs. So what are some of the benefits? You know, oftentimes there's this discussion of, is cash transfer better, is public works better? And I would say that it's complementary. There's certain people that are able to work in public works. You cannot put children to work. You should not be putting the elderly to work. So the complementarity between cash transfers and public works to me is quite obvious in the life cycle of an individual. And there's many synergies that can be made. What are some of the benefits? They provide immediate income, wages or cash in kind, in return for what they do for labor. That in itself, the labor has direct and indirect local economic multipliers. So the more you use local labor, the more you use local material or appropriate technologies, the more you're actually creating local multipliers in your own village and your economy. At the same time, it's about generating meaningful employment and enhancing the skills capacity of individuals. When you have these large labor-based or labor-intensive programs, you're also supporting that whole capacity development of these people, also capacity development of the local institutions and the whole infrastructure that goes around it. It's also about, or it can also be about sensitizing environmental degradation, or in capacity development, it's not just about learning how to build a bridge, or it's not just about helping childcare center, but it can also be about sensitizing them about environmental risk. And the reason I say this, for example, in a program in Haiti, which was addressing one of the hurricanes, one of the programs that was initiated, and this was an interagency program, actually was doing water and soil conservation, and it hired masses of labor, workers, and oftentimes unskilled, uneducated, but masses of workers who were then taught how to properly plant, how to ensure that they're not ripping out plantation for commercial reasons that might actually be further aggravating the erosion. But at the same time, sensitizing them over environmental degradation. I was back in Haiti last year and realized that even though they had no donor funding per se, that the workers in the villages were still planting. And when we asked, they had actually learned that they're planting, they're continuing to plant, and they're continuing to ensure that they were actually putting in these measures to discourage erosion, was actually saving many lives, in a sense, in the other hurricanes that have followed through since then. It's about creating, maintaining, and rehabilitating assets. Oftentimes, employment and income security is highest when you're actually maintaining those assets. The issue about sustainability is quite important because there have been assets, roads, bridges, that have not been maintained or that have been developed with under quality. And sometimes there's arguments that will say, labor-based approaches cannot have a certain level of quality, and we have actually proven that wrong over the years. There's, many agencies have been around working on public works. ILO has been doing this at least since the 1970s. And so there's many pilots, especially in this region, that prove that the quality can be kept up to a certain level through labor-based public works. And if properly designed, they could continue to strengthen existing national social protection systems, or they can help build them in countries that don't have them. And I think this is an important point that I want to make to yourselves, who are mainly social protection experts, that through public works, we create assets through labor. So these workers have to be insured. They need to be given proper occupational safety and health measures. But there are many issues in relation to social protection that need to be taken into consideration. And that's where I find that the synergies of the collaboration can be strengthened, where you can ensure that many of these programs could actually contribute to building or strengthening some of your existing systems. Okay, so let me now turn to the tool. So when we talk about the ISPA Public Works tool, what are we talking about? We are talking about a tool that was developed by the many partners that I showed you. So it's an interagency tool. It creates a checks and balances between different mandates, different perspectives, because every agency, every government, every donor may have different interests. But it's creating sort of a common understanding, a consensus, or a baseline for what we mean to be a good, sound public works program. The ISPA framework is made up of the What Matters guidance notes. So the section that I just described about the conceptual aspects of public works is also mentioned in the What Matters guide. And that's online, so you can actually access that yourselves if you would like to read further. Second, there's a questionnaire. And that questionnaire is a very simple Excel file that looks at different criteria, assessment criteria, that again was agreed on by all of these experts on public works. The third is an assessment matrix. So it's a table that basically shows how well or how poor a program may be doing. And that's for the ISPA team that will then assess where they find that each of the criteria are. And that then allows governments and public work specialists to be able to address those problems, especially in the, say, a scaling up of the program or whatever. Then the fourth is the country report. So the country report is a final report that is put together, validated by the national stakeholders, and then put into a form of report. I should have started also by saying that the question yesterday about the national stakeholders. In the Public Works tool, very much the discussion is around also bringing all the partners on board at the very beginning. So it's not just international partners, but we're also talking about national and local beneficiary partners that go all the way down the chain to ensure that they're part of the ISPA assessment also. At the very beginning, it's not highlighted here, there's also an inception report that was produced. And again, that inception report was produced with all the national stakeholders and the partners that were involved. And I think it's very important because the ISPA tools were designed and developed in such a way that they contribute to national ownership. I mean, the idea is not that this tool be for the ILO or for the WHO or the FAO or the World Bank, but it's really for the tool so that it can help the national programs themselves. And they can do it without us or they can do it with our support, but it also creates that checks and balances to ensure that the program is solid. Okay, so then what are the different criteria that we assess through the program? I'll just quickly read them through because then I go into detail. We have eligibility and targeting, benefits, timing, and duration of a program. We are also looking at what are the activities, what are the kind of assets that are created. Is it a road, is it a bridge, is it an irrigation scheme? Then institutions and coordinating, which is also very important. So at the national level, how are the different ministries or how are the local institutions working together? And how are they coordinated and how are they being financed? Then, of course, monitoring and evaluation. And the coherence across programs. Again, this is also very important because if you have cash transfer programs, you have public work programs, you have health programs, it's how are these programs then all working together to ensure that there's a certain level of coherence between the programs. It's also about skills and employability. So it's about ensuring that these programs are also delivering on capacity development. Again, not just the workers, but also in terms of local institutions, national capacity. And I should add, well, I'll add that at the end. And then the last point is the conditions of work and labor practices. This is also quite important to ensure that certain things have been thought through: occupational safety and health. What are the different types of labor practices? So if we go in detail, eligibility and targeting. So what are we addressing here? We're addressing, or we will be asking questions like, so that you have to imagine this in the Excel file, right? So we're asking questions like, how are you reaching target populations? Are you doing this? Are you focusing on the food insecure? Are you focusing on the vulnerable people? So what is your targeting methodology? Is it geographical, categorical? Is it actually addressing the needs of the poor? Is it addressing the needs and the useful works that could be created through these programs? Is it also looking at the proper eligibility criteria? Are we also looking at vulnerable people? Possibly some indigenous persons, indigenous technologies could also be considered, refugees, disabled persons, and so forth. Then the benefits and timing and duration. The question is it addressing questions which are provided? What are the entitlements that are being provided? Are they adequate? And how appropriate are they? What is the wage level? Is the wage level sufficient? Are you not offering a wage level that is too high that might end up distorting the market? We also look at issues like gender aspects. Are you offering equal pay to men and women? Are you offering daycare services? Are you ensuring that women have the proper personal sanitation needs that may be required on site? It's also about timing and duration. So as you know, public works may not be necessary or needed to carry out a public works all year. You may only want to do it during the lean season. There might be an issue of, what is the best mechanism? So again, here is where the complementarity between public works and cash transfers lie. And going back to the PSNP, the Ethiopian program, there, for example, they offer wages in certain times, and in other times they give cereal. And the calculations of the payments are done not on the amount of wages, but actually on the equivalent of 3 kilograms of cereal, which is supposed to be self-sufficient for the household. So there's different ways of doing this, and the questionnaire tries to then get all this data so that it can be assessed. The criteria on asset creation and services, it looks at issues like the rationale. What is the labor intensity? What is the kind of infrastructure asset that you're trying to provide? Have you thought about the quality and management, the maintenance? Have we looked at the environmental impact in the assets that you're creating? What are the costs? And have you thought about the appropriate training and supervision that may be needed to ensure that you're also providing capacity development for employability? Then it also looks at the types of activities, right? So you might have something that is very much in the agricultural sector or natural resource management through that. It may also be about road infrastructure, construction or maintenance of the gray infrastructure, roads, bridges, these things. It might also be about waste and sanitation management. It may also be about social services or social infrastructure like the schools or the health services and so forth. This is what initially the ISPA team agreed on as the first 5 elements, although there's many more. And again, I probably should pause here and say that the ISPA tool is a living document. So the idea is not that it ends here. We are constantly getting feedback with the intention of also updating these tools. So this is at least what was agreed in the first batch of ISPA assessments. Then there's institution coordination and financing. And I think this is one that's maybe the most challenging, but is also very important. It's the issue of how, what are the roles and responsibilities between the different actors, right? Who are the national stakeholders? Who has which responsibility and how? It also is about ensuring the scalability of these programs and the responsiveness in times of crises. And it's also about ensuring or questioning whether if adequate funding is efficiently managed. Monitoring and evaluation. So here again, it's about the ability to track results and assess their impact, and to look at the transparency mechanisms that have been put into place in these national programs. Coherence and integration across programs. So it's questions which are related to how are they linking to other programs. They can be public works programs, they can be social services, they can be social protection, or other complementary interventions, as I mentioned earlier, like health and other education, childcare schemes. And also to ensure that people who should not be excluded are included. People who are of active age are included in the public works, but then people like elderly, disabled who are physically unable to work, or children are considered for whatever cash transfer program that would exist or could be complementary to this. And also to question whether if an exit strategy has been thought out already at the time of the design of the program. Skills and employability, so the questions are around the kind of curricula, the kind of delivery and incentives, the logistics. Sometimes even in some of the programs we've looked at how they link up to national certification schemes. As I think I mentioned in the Barefoot Technicians training for India, there was a whole scheme that was created for people less than grade 10, because one of the issues was this trade-off, which is the quality of the assets, right? So it was to ensure that there were barefoot technicians that have been trained that can actually supervise the public works, and they themselves have gone through part of the program, and to ensure then that that capacity development continues. Conditions of work, it's looking at the compliance with national labor laws. It's looking at accessing labor standards in terms of social protection benefits. It's about the occupational safety and health, and it's also about the respect of workers' rights. So these are all questions that we ask and that we try to collect data on. So in terms of the ISPA Public Works tool itself, the Public Works tool is probably the first tool that was developed out of the ISPA series of programs. So we've had a little more time to also let the tool mature. There were 2 pilots that were carried out, as many of the ISPA tools are doing. The first pilot was in El Salvador, and the second one was in Liberia. Both of these programs were led by the World Bank. Then the third pilot was an application in Senegal, so this was requested by the World Bank, and also led by the World Bank, to carry out an assessment of some 20 plus public work programs. So this was actually not an assessment of one program, but it actually assessed 20, and then it picked 3 with also different sources of financing to do a further assessment on the 3. And then the last assessment, and I won't say much about this because Barnabas will go into this, is the application in Tanzania, which was a request by the government, and then ILO led this last application. But just to say that the assessments vary. I mean, they can vary in size, they can vary in time, but what they can do is they can look at public works, multiple public work programs to assess how a country is applying these, or it could also be one large program or a national public employment program, for example. So it's public ISPA tools are flexible tools that can be applied in any context. And tailoring the tool, and this is also very important because it is about national ownership of these tools. So it's really about trying to contextualize it in the situation of the country. And there are a couple assessments that are planned. There is Malawi, Uganda, are a couple of the countries that have been mentioned. So we hope those that will take place. And again, the way that the assessments are carried out is there's many different ways. It can be the government that makes a request to one of the agencies. So it could be to the World Bank, it could be to the ILO. Then it activates the working group at the global level. And then an assessment would then be carried out at the local level. I mention this because, and maybe this is the one thing I'll mention about Tanzania, which I think is really important, because the Tanzanian assessment was a request of the government, and the agencies in Tanzania were the ones that actually carried out the assessment. So we had the local office of the World Bank, the local office of the ILO, and the local office of DFID, who were the initial, I would say, interagency partners with the government, and then eventually the local stakeholders, which Barnabas will explain, which also informed the global working group. So in the global working group, it's the partners that you saw on the second slide that highlighted the various different people that were involved. So there was a checks and balances also not only in the local level, but also with expertise from the global level. In the case of Tanzania, it was the field assessment was then supported by EU, Finland, and OECD. So it's a mechanism which is not just local, it also allows for international experts to fly in at their own account, so there's no expenses, they pay for themselves to join the assessment. Right now for the ISPA tool, we've had no requests. for the public works. So it can be the government, it can be, yeah. No, so the request can come from a government. It can also be an interagency partner who's been working with the government, who finds utility and may offer the tool. And otherwise, it can also be the country themselves that decides to take initiative on the assessment. I think the advantage of having the different interagency partners involved is that you're getting that much more expertise from different perspectives. I mean, there's obviously challenges in everyone having their own mandate, but I think what the ISPA tools, and I think I speak for all the tools, what it's actually done is that all that discussion and consensus has already been done earlier. So you have a tool that has consensus by all the different partners and their level of expertise that is then being applied in a country. So I'm not going to go into this. I think I would rather let Barnabas be able to give you more examples at the detail level how Tanzania worked. There are a couple slides, I think 2 slides and a video, which are on your platform, so you can look at these later on if you wish. Thanks.
Thank you, Mito. Good afternoon once again. Yeah, I'm going to present to you on the application of the ISPA Public Works. Mito has talked about how it is done, so I'm going to give you the practical experience from the field. Now, I'll start with the country context very briefly, and why would the government decided to do it. And later I'll talk about how the application was made, the methodology, key results areas, and the question that were used. But the most important is the findings from the assessment, because that's where you can do the practice in the field. And later on I'll talk about the good practice, lesson learned, and recommendation. At the end, I'll show you some of the pictures which, after the application of the tool, there was we used the recommendations to do something. So you are going to see what we have done. The country, Tanzania, is within East Africa. It's bounded by Kenya, Uganda, Congo, DRC, Rwanda. The country is the area of the country is around 945 square kilometer, with a population of about 50 million. And out of the 50 million, about 28% they are under poverty. They are living under poverty. So the government decided to embark on a comprehensive, productive social safety net as a strategy toward social protection. Before this program, TASAF was supporting communities to implement some projects related to water, health, road, market, and so forth. So we support that one for quite a number of years, and then at the end, the government decided to implement this social protection. So now the main objective of this the program which we are running right now is to increase income within at the household level, so that they can improve their consumption. So a lot of things have been done, that including we did the targeting of beneficiaries all over the country, which has 161 districts, I could say. We targeted 1.3 million households. That one is not there in the PowerPoint. And then we enrolled 1.1 million households. And these 1.1 million households, they are receiving transfers associated with the following. The first one is basic transfer. The first one, so that one enabled them to increase their consumption. This is around $5 a month. And that one is being paid on bi-monthly basis into shillings. The second one is conditional cash transfer to ensure co-responsibility on education and health. That is the uniqueness of this program. That are all children under 5 and who has been enrolled in the program, or a children who is born within the household which has been enrolled in the program, they are eligible to receive transfers after attending the clinic up to 5 years. And then there is a co-responsibility of education. All children who are in secondary school and in primary school and in the program, household that has been enrolled in the program, are eligible to receive additional income transfer so that they attend the school. 80%. So we have formulated a system whereby the school teachers and the health personnel monitor the attendance of the children so that we collect the information. So anyone who is not complying, then he misses the transfers. So this has motivated a lot the household to ensure that their children go to school, they buy the scholastic material, a lot of things, and it has helped a lot to improve to make sure that the children grow well. But then another component of the program is public works, which I'm responsible for. So this one is being done during the specific period of the year, the lean season. That's where the income is most needed. And we have divided the country into two seasons. Unimodal, that's where they receive 1 rain per year, and bimodal. So within 4 months, this 4 months, a household is guaranteed to work for 15 days a month for 4 months. That is 60 days a year. And the income they earn is about $1.3 per day. So at least a household can earn at least $81 in 4 months' time. That's an additional income on top of cash transfer, best transfer, and the conditional cash transfer. But then on top of cash transfer through public works, then because in order to receive the wage, you need to work. So there are several interventions, like we are using the watershed approach to identify, community can identify the intervention which they need. But in many cases, the PROSA project which we are supporting, they are related to charcoal dams, forestry, fish ponds, road construction, and so forth. So in that case, then some assets have been created for the community to use. But then another thing which is very important under public works, as said by Mito, is skills transfer. Under public works, because people are doing the work manually by themselves, so there are some skills that can be gained and can be used in future intervention at household level. So 3 basic things: cash transfer, asset creation, and skills transfer. Those are the most important in any public works intervention. And the ISPA tools, which I'm going to present today, have looked into these 3 areas. Another component of the program is livelihood enhancement activities. This we want to ensure that all the beneficiaries are imparted with skills on savings and form groups so that they can invest the money they have for future. So they form the group, they do saving, and they invest. But the last component is capacity building, which is to ensure that all the program implementers they know the importance of the program, follow up the procedures. So why this application was used? Initially, when we started this program, because we started with cash transfer, conditional cash transfer and cash transfer all over the country. The huge task that was done within the program was targeting and enrollment, and that was accomplished within 18 months. And then all the households started receiving the cash transfer. So for the public works, we only started in 80 districts, that is about 2015. So in order to expand, the government wanted to expand public works. Then they decided with the development partners that, okay, let's try the ISPA tool for the 80 districts that have implemented public work to see what are the strengths and the weaknesses of implementing public works, so that when you roll out, some of the issues came in so that we can address them. So it was a joint decision between the development partner and the government that it was important to make an assessment so that we know first, it will contribute to the delivery of the public works tool, but also to see what are the strengths and the weakness of the implementation, and also to assess the impact. So this one was done in collaboration with as said by Mito, with the development partner, including European Union, the government of Finland, ILO, GTZ. So, GIZ, OCD, based in Europe. So these are the ones who provide the support to hire the consultant. 2 consultants were hired, 1 international consultant and 1 local consultant. On the government side, the government provided all other ground logistical support, including the initial planning. So that was done for about 3 months, and these are the results. Now let's look at public works program application. One is the methodology. As I already said, first there was a request from the government, and that is it's a decision between partners, development partners, and the government to decide on the application of the tool. As I said, the tool enables the government to see what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, so that the weaknesses are addressed through various interventions. So a consultation was made with the government to decide on the field schedule after, of course, going through developing the terms of reference, the time frame, after agreeing all those, and then with the consultant, we decided together to decide on the overall program schedule. The second activity was to select the site and there's the sub-project. In the 8 districts that Public Works was implemented, there were a total of 549 sub-projects, and the ISPA assessment carried out 15 sub-projects. So they were chosen according to the sector, from water, forestry, roads, and so forth. So there was a combination of. So we had to select the site and the type of sub-project, and then another consideration was on the rural and the urban, because both we are implementing both in urban and rural. And then the third was the selection of the respondents, we are supposed to go and interview. That includes the national sector expert, the national, regional, at the district level, direct beneficiaries of the program, but also we interviewed the local service provider. These are independent people who are supporting the project at community level. But also there is this community management committee members who are also at the community level. We also selected beneficiaries among women, youth, elderly, persons with disabilities, and disadvantaged communities. And then together with the consultant, we made the desk review to populate the questionnaires, because there was a set of questionnaires which you need to follow. I mean, a lot of questions. And you know, in order to them to understand, some of the questions have to be translated in the local language. And then we planned for the field visit. We made meetings. We held focus group discussion and site validation. Also, we did the data, the consultant did the data analysis after collecting all the data from the field, made a validation using the assessment matrix that used a 4-colored code. Now, the first one is not clearly seen there, but the first one is latent. Latent means that is the lowest score, I could say. If you could put it 1, 2, 3, 4, then latent score is 1. That this need to have a close look, that something need to be done to address because it's severe. So, and the second one is the imaging. Imaging, something has been done, but need some kind of improvement. And the third one is moderate. Moderate is much, much better, and the performance is good. But the highest is advanced. That this one is perfect. So using a 4-colored colored system, consultant could could score. Okay, when it comes to targeting enrollment, then the score could be maybe advanced or moderate or emerging or latent, depending upon what they have seen. So after that, they prepared the report, assessment report, and also they had a validation report that was presented to us, and the scores were presented to us, and we gave our comment that okay, maybe this one need to be improved, and this something like that. So at the end, they produced a country report. You can see the country report in the ISPA website. The areas that were looked into, they were, as I've seen it, but Mito have already mentioned about targeting. I mean, those are the key areas under the public works. So maybe our main interest is to, what are the main findings now? These are the key findings. Under targeting and the eligibility, the consultant put this one under moderate. Moderate because there was already targeting, there was targeting mechanism and eligibility are in place. As I said, targeting involved both community targeting and PMT. So when the assessment was done, targeting was already completed for the whole program. And during the targeting, as I said, about 79% of all the targeted also have been enrolled and they are receiving the cash transfer. And in the targeting, in the program, 70% of the household that are receiving the cash transfer are women. So the consultant ranked this one as being moderate. The second area was on the nature of benefit, duration, and timing. This was also moderate in the sense that the program benefits are adequate and is appropriate and compatible to the local context. The program is, as I said, if for the public works, we are offering $81. And for the conditional cash transfer and cash transfer altogether, maybe something like $200 a year. So in total, something like $250 up to $300, $250. So the consultant found that this one is moderate. But there is an issue. The complete information on predictability and timeliness of the program benefit is not adequate, especially for the public works because it was the first year of implementation. But for the conditional cash transfer and cash transfer, there's already they know when they are going to receive the. After every 2 months, they receive the benefit. But for the public works, because it was the first year, it was not predictable. But now that one has been addressed, and they are receiving the regular benefit. On creation of asset, this one they put is as emerging and moderate, so in between. Because the program supported a project identify the community, that is one, and that's very important. And most of the sub-projects are contributing to environmental conservation and increasing resilience to climate change. In fact, most of the projects are related to natural resource management because when you are using the watershed approach, it's easier to identify a project related to water conservation, charcoal dams, forestry, whatever. So that one was good. But it is emerging because of the quality of asset that was created in the first year. It was found that the quality was somehow is of concern because one, inadequate supervision from the technical supervisors from the district level and the knowledge of the local service provider. But also on the operation and maintenance that whenever there's a project is complete, who is supposed to own? It should be related to there's a concern on operation and maintenance. And that's why I think it was put as emerging and moderate because the second bullet, there was concern on the quality and the technical supervision. Because without a very proper technical supervision, you will not find good quality public works. On coordination and institution and financing, this was also ranked as emerging and moderate. Why? coordination on the oversight mechanism is in place because the program is working with the local government authorities at district level. The program is also working with the ministries. Up there, TASAF is an independent agency under the president office. But then, so the actual coordination at national level is in place. But there was a concern on the link across other programs that is not fully maximized, and capacity building at the lower level was still missing to ensure that quality assets are being built. Also, they looked at the financial support to local government authorities. It's available, but needs to be revisited to address emerging operational gaps. There were some gaps that were observed on the funds that were transferred to the district level to ensure that they are looking after the project. But also, as I said before, we only targeted about 70%, so some of the villages has not been targeted yet. On monitoring and evaluation, this also came as emerging and moderate. M&E plan is in place and supported with the enhanced MIS. And then there's a need to include qualitative and quantitative indicators. I remember yesterday there was somebody who asked this question of the quality and the quantitative indicators. I remember yesterday. So this was also observed during the assessment. But there was also an issue of skills training, cost efficiency in terms of how much does really cost to construct a road, how much does it really cost to construct a charcoal dam. So those kind of indicators need to be documented to see whether you are delivering a program which is cost effective or you are on the higher side. Value for money. Okay? So this was, some of the indicators were not really in the MYS, but that one has been included already. On coherence and integration across program, this was also emerging and moderate. There is a policy framework for harmonization and integration which is in place. And in fact, right now, the government is formulating a national social protection policy, which cut across both contributory and non-contributory social protection activities. So public works, universal pension, age pension, all those they are included in the policy. And then, operational hinges on existing common administrative tool. Potential to achieve coherence and integration across programs is very high. Other complementary components are not fully operational. And integration efforts at local level is limited as demonstrated by the quality of asset. But also there is a issue of material plans are not linked to the district investment and budget plans because, the communities are coming up with a multi-year plan, a 3-year plan. After a rigorous planning process on the public works side. So these plans were not initially integrated into the district plan. And for that case, so the district expert were not sure what's really going on, but now this one has been addressed upon that all the plans should, after all, the one who are supporting the community are from the district. So they have to bring the plans to the district so that they know what activities are being done so that they provide the required support. The 7th criteria was on skills and employability. This was ranked as emerging because one of the issues was sensitization sessions and the implementation strategy are shifted towards building asset through public works activities over establishing organized pathway for skills acquisition. In public works program, one of the critical issue is how to transfer the skills to the beneficiaries. Because once you are able to transfer the skills to the beneficiaries, beneficiaries will use these skills for future employment or to engage in meaningful activities using the skill that have been gained from the project. So don't focus on asset creation alone. You need to make sure that the beneficiaries get the skills required so that they use it in future. I'll give you an example. In one of the district, the community decided to construct on fish ponds, because there are a lot of water sources. So they did it in as a community project, but a few members of the community who are the beneficiaries decided to do it at their own at home. In one event, the beneficiary could harvest about 150 kilograms of fish, which they could sell and get more income. So you can see it's very important because that has a long impact in the future. The other issue is on institution and technical capacity for skills development is available in the country, but need to be fully maximized. The institution, there is an institution in the country that is responsible for training of semi-skilled labor, Vocational Education Training Authority. It's there in place, but it's amazing because all those who are going through this institution, they are not really available at the community level. Usually they end up in urban areas and seek employment. So they are not really, you cannot see them at the community level. So we had to find a solution. The last one was condition of work and the labor practice. This was emerging to moderate. There is a policy and a legislative framework that is in place. The client charter to be given to beneficiaries' rights and responsibility in PSSN participation, including public works. We were developing it and we have handed over to all the beneficiaries. Client charter is a sheet of paper detailing what is your role, what is your responsibility, what you are not supposed to do, and something like that. And then also the consultant found that the program is offering first aid kit and safety training and personal protective equipment to when they are doing some work. As I said, the assessment report is available, so you can access it through this website. Now, during the assessment, the ISPA 2 did not cover the following. One, robust evaluation research needed on the impact of public works to the beneficiaries. This was not done because it was only the first year of implementation. So you cannot really get to the impact. But now we are going to do it this year. We are going to hire a consultant to do the assessment to see what is the impact of public works, especially on the asset that is being created and the skills, whether they've been, they have got it. And then the other area are public works value for money when compared to cash transfer. Public works needs a lot of investment in terms of planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation compared to cash transfer. And the administrative part of the public works is much higher than cash transfer. So they need to decide, you need to decide whether we go for public works or we go to cash transfer. And then quality of asset in the medium and long term. That one can be complemented with the impact, because when the consultant will be looking on the impact, he will also look on the quality of asset that has been created in terms of and the sustainability of it. So these three areas have not been covered. So let's see the good practice, lesson, lens, and recommendation. The first one, the consultant recommended that we should provide a complete information on the time, predictability of the program benefit to beneficiary, give them flexibility to plan their resources. And that one has been done. We have decided, the management, that okay, because cash transfer has been done after every 2 months. Then public works, we are supposed to give the benefits after every month. That means after completing the 15 days. So whenever cash transfer has been administered, we combine with public works so that beneficiaries get additional income, especially when they are preparing the farms. So this has helped them to gain some more income. On asset creation, well, they recommended that we have to improve the quality asset, yes. In terms of selection, to integrate in the local development planning, that's been done. In terms of design, to ensure adequate technical capacity, we train the district personnel on watershed planning, implementation and monitoring for all of the 44 districts. And in terms of construction, to ensure adequate technical supervision and monitoring. And in terms of maintenance, to ensure that village council and the district are aware of their responsibility. These are some of the issues that have been taken into account. We even trained the district technical teams, and then we have even trained the local service providers. In terms of to create sustainable asset, strengthen the linkage with sector agencies and other programs through existing administrative tool. Yes, that one has been done. On institution and coordination, improve the technical knowledge of local service provider on PWP implementation. That one has been done. On monitoring and evaluation, to include qualitative and quantitative indicator on asset creation and skills program in the MAS plan. That one has been done. And then to provide a metrics to measure the impact of asset creation in terms of quality, income generation, employability, and sustainability. This is ongoing. And I said there's a consultant who is going to measure the impact, so the report will guide us whether we have done it correctly or not. But on the other issue is on baseline data collection should include outcome indicators in the public works. That is we have a specific section on monitoring and evaluation that is taken care of. Another area is on coherence and integration across program. Clear link of sub-project to food security, climate change adaptation, long-term economic and employment potential in the annual and budget fund for the district. Because now we are using the integrated watershed management, many of the sub-projects that are being implemented at the community level are very much related and linked to food security. And we are working with WFP to address that, to ensure that sub-projects are very much related to food security and climate change adaptation. On skills and employability, to include vocational education training authority in our National Steering Committee, to pursue collaboration with other like-minded organizations for synergy and impact, and to develop flexible tailor-fit training courses linked to long-term economic and employability potentials. We are planning for tailor-made training for the district personnel on various sectors like forestry, water, and so forth. But also, there's a clear coordination now at the national level that we are working with the ministries to ensure that all social protection activities are linked together. And then number 7 is on condition of work for labor practices to enforce consistent standard across areas of coverage. One of the tasks of the sector expert team from each ministry is to provide the required standard. So we are collecting the standard, we document them, we develop some books, and then we give it to the district and to the ward level and community level staff so to ensure that these standards are being followed. And then to enhance the capacity of program implementers on standard, and then to include a section of safety at work in the operational manual. Now, after the ISPA assessment that covered only a few districts, the program has been now rolled to 44 districts, which is about 30%. There was a limitation of financial resources, and that's why we only limited to 44 districts. And then we ensure that there's a technical team in each district to ensure that it provides the required support to the local service provider. So the task of the district technical team is to go around and see what's really happening and provide the required support. But also, we developed some simple guidelines in local language for LSP so that they can interpret the sector norms and standard. We have trained 2,600 local sales provider on the basic technical training. We also developed the standard drawings for each of the sectors that will be used by the district expert. We have the technical manual that was in English. It has been translated in the local language. But also, the most important thing is that there is a demand to upscale public works all over the country. And the government now has decided that in 2019, public works will be scaled up all over the country to cover the 1.1 million households. Now, here are some of the books that we have developed. The first one on my left-hand side, it was on measurements, using tape measure, using A-frame, and so forth. These are all in Kiswahili. This one here is a book on composite manure. The other one is on road. The other one is on rainwater harvesting. All types of rainwater harvest technologies, they are in there in a very simple language in Kiswahili. So all these books we are going to print and distribute to the district and to the community level, including local sales providers. So whenever you have a sub-project related to compositing or soil fertility management, then he go through and make sure that he follow the required sector norms and standard. Also, as I said, we have developed standard drawings. These are the standard drawings, which are in PDF. So whenever a sector expert at the district level, he has the book always to ensure that he followed the required standard. I would like to show you some of the sub-projects that we have, they have been implemented after the ISPA. Now these pictures after the ISPA, they are quite different from the original one. You can see this is a Sonchek Dam on a hilly area that is controlling irrigation. This is a semicircular band. It's an area where somehow is flat, and in this region, they only receive 12 up to 15 rain days a year. 12 up to 15 rain days a year. So in order to ensure that we capture the rain, they are digging the semicircular band, and then they plant millet. And this one has demonstrated that, okay, communities themselves can uptake and use it in their respective field. This is a semicircular, it's a soil band that has been constructed across, and maize can be planted. All these are demonstration plot. Also, you can see this is a micro catchment where they dig the pits to catch rainwater. This is an earthfill dam. It was breached, then it was rehabilitated using the local labor, and now they are using for small-scale irrigation. Actually, the dam is around 800,000 cubic meter, a lot of water. And then this is a fish pond, which is storing about 6,000 fishes, so they can use this one as a means of getting income. Thank you so much. That is a public works in Tanzania. You are most welcome to come and visit us.
So thank you very much, Barnabas. Let's open up for questions, if anybody has any questions. Okay. I'll take 3 questions, and then we let him respond.
Thank you very much for very interesting and I think very good work. I think I should congratulate what you have done in your countries. So my question is about the payment and the like how you value the wage for the people who are participating in the program, and and how you pay for them. Does it follow the law of budget in the country, because now we are struggling with this issue in my country, because everything's according to the law. We have to get the receipt, we have to have the profile for even just $1. So how do you deal with such kind of thing? So you pay for the poor, the people in the community who cannot issue the receipt or complete the profiles. Thank you.
Second question?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Second question is, I would like to know who is implementing the program at the local level? Who is implementing the program at local level, whether it is the government or the private sector contractors? And if that is the case of private sector implementers, what is the policy at the national level? Because that means will the policy provide to make use of the market forces to implement such program at that level? Okay.
Third question?
So, Barnabas, the public works in Tanzania have long history, yeah? It's nothing new. And I know it. So what, if any, difference this assessment made for your design and implementation?
Maybe I start with that one. This assessment has made a very different. Why? Because public works in Tanzania has been there for the last 12 years or so. And I was involved in that one. That is the fortunate part of it. And the first one was more focusing on asset creation. When I'm talking of asset, people, the community could think of building a 10-kilometer road. That is perfect. They could think of building a market. That was perfect. But then before that, and something which I could not mention here, the ratio, and that is important if you can note down, the ratio, initially, the ratio of wage to non-wage was 50-50. Do you get me? Now, the public works under PSSN, under Productive Social Safety Net, is different in the sense that the ratio of wage to non-wage is 75-25. So this is really a cash transfer program, because you ensure that all the money which goes to the village, 75 is for wages and 25% is for non-wage, including tools, material, supervision, cost of local service provider. So you make an allocation. I mean, so anything which is not compatible with 75 to 25 is not funded, or they have to choose another one. That is one. Two, the public works under PSSN right now is using a watershed approach, which was not there before. So we are mainly focusing on natural resources conservation, including rainwater harvesting, charcoal dams, nursery. All these activities, they can attract labor to as high as 90%. In fact, right now, the ratio of labor on average to the non-labor is about 80-20, which is very, very nice. And we are no longer constructing market as before. We are concerned about the road because you construct the road, but there is no enough funds to construct the culvert or even the bridge. So that is the biggest difference. Yeah. On the who is implementing, yeah, I could not say about the institutional framework. TASAF is a national level agency under the President's office, and it works with all the ministries, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Energy, all the ministries, we are working together. And we are also working very closely with the Ministry of Local Government, of which all the districts which I mentioned, 161, they are under the local government, Ministry of Local Government, of which, so at the district level, they are expert now. They're expert in water, they're expert in agriculture, there's an expert on forestry, all those experts. These are the ones forming the technical team. Now, the community has selected as a project to be undertaken, a public works project. As part of the planning process, they also need to identify a local service provider. A local service provider is the one is enabled, an individual, independent, a private, who has a knowledge on the subject. So the community management committee advertised for the work at the community level. That is community contracting. That, okay, we inspire to receive funds from TASAF to do activity 1, 2, 3. We are looking for a qualified person to do the work with the support of community managing committee. And they put it in their budget. So the people apply, and then they enter into a contract. We disburse funds to them, they pay. But the wage is being administered centrally in the sense that we produce job card for all the beneficiaries. They go and attend work on manual basis. That means the local service provider, on top of supporting on the technical side, but also is supporting them to ensure that everybody finishes the task rate, and then they sign that, okay, he has finished, and the information entered into the MIS at the district level, and at national level, we could just see all the type of sub-project and the attendance, and then we can generate the payment. So it's a government really implementing the sub-project with the support of local service provider who are private individuals. The payment, especially the wage setting. This is something very interesting, I would say. The wage, before setting up a wage of 1.3, we carried out an assessment of how much that the private sector, the market pay. This is almost 50%, 50 to 60% of the wage. Yeah, almost. Because the wage in the private sector, in rural setting, for example, is about $2. And now we are paying, and $2 you have to pay for 8 hours work. We are paying 1.3 of a dollar for 4 hours work. So that means if it was an 8-hour work, you should be around 2.7. So we are more or less, we are incompatible with the market rate. Of course, it should be low, always, so that those people who can do other activity to earn money, they have to go there. And that's the philosophy. Yeah, it's only those who are in need. And for our program, we decided to enroll 2 beneficiaries, both from the same household. One, the main recipient, and the other one is a substitute. In case the main recipient is sick, or he has something, or she has something to do, then the substitute come and work, but payment is made to the main recipient. It's a bit tricky, but that's how it's working. Yeah, so that, you have to give flexibility to the people to do some other work. But the good thing, most of them are really eager to work. So this applies to all those who are old enough. I mean, some people are old, they cannot work, then they can send a substitute to work. But for the program which now we are trying to design, it only will be restricted to only those who can provide labor. And if those who cannot provide labor, there's a design issue that to provide them with the direct support. Yeah.
Can I just add one point on the wage issue? Because at the global level, there are other programs that set their wages differently. There was a study carried out by the ILO on appropriate wages for public employment programs, which assessed 3 different countries. So there's many different ways of actually addressing the issue of wage setting. But also, like in the case of Narega, and I think I mentioned it in this group, or I may have mentioned it in the earlier group. In the case of Narega, the program actually set a wage which is higher than the market wage. But what it actually did do was that it increased the bargaining power of those vulnerable, poor rural workers to also be able to then not accept labor which was, close to, or payments which were indecent and not considered to be decent labor. So just to point out that there are many different ways of setting wages, and there are studies out there that are probably worth looking at. The other point I wanted to mention is that there is Towards the Right to Work, a guidebook for designing innovative public employment programs, and one of the booklets that is about setting the appropriate wage. So there are many publications out there that I think are worth looking at because it depends on the country context and it depends on your wage setting.
The question of wage is somehow complicated depending upon whether it's urban, whether it's rural. I mean, there are a lot of factors to consider. But then to wind up, how do we pay? Currently, we are paying through a manual system. That after generation of the payment sheet from the MYS, we send money to we request the money to be sent to the district, and then the commune managing committee from the community come to the bank to collect the money with the support of the district personnel. They take the police, they send the money to the beneficiary, and payment is just done once per village, only once. And the money that has not been paid, it will be returned back to the bank tomorrow. So that's how, but we are now piloting the e-payment, electronic payment. We have started, and that one will be concluded all over the country by 2019. That, yeah. I don't know, but we are eager to ensure that we have to make the e-payment. So far, we have only 16 districts so far. But okay, some of them are not even interested. The one thing which I didn't mention about, before the payment is made in a certain village, in a certain community, there is a community session. Because all the beneficiaries will be there. So we make use of the platform to inform them about the various messages, like health, nutrition, sanitation, and so forth, even hand washing. And to inform them about how to make use of the money, and so forth. And so these community sessions help them to get some more additional information. Yeah.
Okay. I have another small questions about any accident happen while the people are working, because they have no contract, they have no guarantee that if the accident happen, who will pay for it. And my question is also relating to the sort of funds. Is it fund paying for the labor from the government or from the donor? Because normally from the donor or any international sponsor, it's easy. But from the government, they will monitor the money very strictly. So my question is the government from the government, is a fund from the government? And the second is who will responsible for like death and accident?
Thank you. This money is from the government. And of course, the government has borrowed money from, especially from the World Bank, but also we are being supported by DFID and SIDA Sweden. But also from the Treasury, they're also contributing. So that means in future, we're going to pay back the loan. Now, on the accident, those are some of the risks associated with cash transfer. It has happened once or twice. Yeah. But as I said, normally we have the police. And when you see the map, we are very close to Rwanda and Burundi, which is in civil war. So some of them are migrating into our country. So at one time, they make sure that they have a gun to ensure that. So they must be very smart. Although the information is being sent to the community, okay, they are going to receive the money on this particular day, but the whole process is, So we have not really experienced accident and theft of funds. We have not. But it's a thing which need to be considered. Yeah. Is it insurance through the workers? Yeah. Oh, okay. There's no workers' compensation as such. Yeah. Only that we ensure that you ensure that there's safety at work by providing the safety gears. And so basically, if somebody get an injury, there's a medical kit. We support the beneficiary to get to the hospital. But the good thing about this program is that because beneficiary is receiving cash transfer from public works and cash transfer, most of them, they have their own insurance. They're only paying about $4 a year for the whole family. So we don't have such kind of insurance for the beneficiaries.
So at the global level, of course, depending on the program, again, there are programs that are actually nationally funded that do try to embed a system which actually ensures that accident insurance and these things are taken into consideration. But even going as far as emergency schemes, so for example, in the case of a post-hurricane or post some sort of natural disaster, we have been able to pilot a program which actually proved that we could have an emergency program that actually helped individuals who are in the informal sector who have never had an identity start contributing to an existing national system. So it's all in the design, and that's why I was stressing the issue of design is extremely important on how you as a government or you as a stakeholder that's working with the national entity determine how you design the program. How do you ensure that that's linking to your social protection systems? How do you ensure that accident insurance is looked for? Because in certain programs, like the program in NIAS in Indonesia, we were helping the government build bridges. So of course you have to have certain accident insurance measures in there. So that's a question of how you design the program. And that's why in the ISPA, in the actual tool under conditions of work and labor practices, it will ask those questions. So that's what we're trying to determine, whether if the program has actually gone as far as thinking about all these things, right? So we're eating into the coffee break. So I also don't want to stop anybody from asking any burning questions, but we're already about 10 minutes late. So if there's any burning questions, raise your hand. But if you would rather go for a coffee, we will be around over coffee, so please feel free to ask either of us while we're there. And then we'll come back to do the clinic. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Please tell us what you chose and why.
Hello. Yeah, representing Group 1. What we choose here is number 1 regarding to condition of work and labor practice. In here we can see, based on a small article, we can see they have policy framework and guideline such as Occupational Safety Health Act 2003, employment and labor law, minimum wage, minimum age, worker right, occupational safety, and health and worker compensation. However, the in practice very limited for the enforcement of standard on law and regulations. And number 2, during the project implementation, no full emphasis on policy related to rights, to collective bargaining, and forming associations. Also, number 3, we can see absence of contract for specific public work and worker sign a contract with district, and they understand only the work and the wages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me go to this table. So tell us which.
Okay. For our group, we got the institution, coordination, and financing. And we choose, after discussion, we decide to choose the moderate. Because according to the definition, it said that the program assigns clear role and responsibility to diverse stakeholders. So in the report, it seems that there are like a clear institution guideline at the national level. We have the National Steering Committee, and then we have the management unit, and then at the up through to the local level, we have the village council. But the problem is that the financing, their finance support is like to the local government agency. It's still, there are some gap, and the flexibility for scale up hinge on existing capacity at various levels support with structure, mandate, and resources. So that's why we choose number 3.
Okay, so this group.
Thank you. And the case given to us on skill and employability, and also this is basically training is limited, and also training is on the safety issues. And what the focus group discussion, what was revealed over there is that they have that is related to the existing skill, but what they want to enhance their skill for better employability, and therefore what they want, they need to explore further skill for better employment opportunity. And so for that matter, of course, there are skill providing agencies, and also the capacity can be enhanced with the criteria, development of the criteria concerned. Therefore, training need, it is already training in place, but need adequacy is the question over here. Therefore, curricula has to be revised, so improved, and also with the training institution concerned, they can do so. That's what we saw.
Thank you so much. Let me go to this table.
Our group is working on the coherent and integration across programs. From the article that we have here, we put it number 2. We see that there are policies and strategies that are already in place, but the problem is with the local level. We don't see any implementation, and we also see the efforts to integrate and harmonize the sub-project together, but it is just not fully established. And we also see the inconsistency or incoherence within the sub-project itself. Some program offer in-kind transfers, but some others are offering cash transfer.
And you said it was 2 emerging, huh? Yeah. Thank you. And then this table.
Our group talking about targeting. So we jump to very quickly to the conclusions. It is moderate, quite good, yeah, because it apply various methods of targeting, like geographical targeting, community targeting, proxy mean tests, and especially they also have community validation to ensure the inclusion and exclusion. And in this article, in this program, they also give the target group for the poor and vulnerable people in the rural area, and especially for the women. So that is very clear criteria for targeting. But some of the mechanisms are in place but not fully monitored, evaluated, and especially we haven't got the information on the impact of targeting. That's why we give the moderate targetings. So that's there is some room for improvement.
Okay, thank you very much. So what did you think? How was the exercise? Was it easy? Was it an easy exercise to do? You have different people around the table, different views. Some tables had more difficulty to agree. And then information. Did you find you had sufficient information? Would you have liked to have more? Yeah? Some groups need more information. Do you think that maybe through the field assessment, maybe if you I said you had gone, but maybe, had you been there yourselves in the field assessment, would you have been able to ask further questions to go further deeper into the questions? No? And then the data collection. The data collection, I had mentioned to you that you had hired a national consultant to help you with the data. Maybe the data could have also been more in-depth analysis. The point of this exercise was basically to show you what it's like to be as part of the ISPA team, right? So you're working with different national stakeholders, different counterparts, possibly different ministries. You're working with different development partners. It could be donor agencies. It could be interagency UN agencies with different mandates. Some may be on agriculture, others on labor, others like the World Bank. So you have many different partners that we're working with. And this exercise is really to show how each of the criteria, and you've just done 5 of the 8 criteria, it can be quite an elaborate process, but once you can come to a consensus, it can help countries then take that information and see how they can better the program, right? So let me turn over to Barnabas. So maybe in terms of how it was done in Tanzania, maybe you could elaborate a bit further.
Yeah, thank you, Mito.
Skill and employability, we have actually quite heated discussion, because when we talk about cash for work program, usually is the lowest level of skill. People who doesn't have any skill because it's related to the wage, related to type of work, and in some countries in Asia, these people don't want to work in manual labor. They don't want to work in manual labor. I mean, there are, but so how do we really try to increase their skill and employability when the condition doesn't really meet this requirement? So I think in a way that we have this aspiration, but the reality is people here usually who want to have a minimum wage or even sometimes set below the minimum wage, say like, I don't have skill, let's me just go there, do maybe bringing a stone or a brick or something, then get low wages. What skill are we talking about? So I think the reality and the aspiration doesn't really match.
So I think from the international experience, labor-based programs have the potential to do capacity building in mass. You're talking about many people, and like the example I gave earlier on the environment, for example. If you're doing water and soil conservation, and say, like, given a concrete example in one country where they use a plant that's called vetiver, and that was what I was alluding to earlier. They actually pull this vetiver because the roots of the vetiver are used for perfume. So there's a commercial interest in pulling this out. And the vetiver, on the other hand, it's a plant that has very long roots. So the advantage of planting and leaving them there is that your soil does not erode. So when you have a hurricane or whatnot, because in this country they've pulled out much of this plant that is actually holding the soil, what it means is that the entire carpet off the mountain is just sliding off. So when the next rainfall comes, it's huge floodings. And this kind of capacity building, which is a manual skill, it's also teaching them how to look at environmental degradation and look at ways in planting. There are ways in which you can plant vetiver so that you commercialize a part of it, because the other problem they're having is people are pulling them out before the roots are mature. So it's also, and that's part of this capacity building and training them in something that would allow them, one, to possibly increase their productivity of vetiver in a commercial fashion. On the other hand, teaching them about environmental degradation and about soil conservation. And in a way, you're also capacity building the masses, because you're talking about many thousands of workers at the same time, and these are unskilled, uneducated people. In the construction field, whether it's masonry or whether it's road construction, it can also be about compacting the road. You don't have to have heavy machinery to compact the road. You can do this with appropriate technologies. In some countries in Africa, they've used this technology called dono, which is basically just compacting using sandbags. Okay, and it's a special type of appropriate technology, but then that now is being replicated in different countries. And that basically then gives them a skill that can be usable in other areas, and the maintenance. I think the maintenance is another very important area to highlight. When you're talking about maintaining roads or maintaining assets, it's the communities that are actually building their capacity to do this. And that can then lead to helping them build associations or start doing, being able to not sell themselves, but being able to position themselves in a way in which they can enter the formal labor market as small-scale construction workers or small-scale companies who are dealing with this. So I think there's many mechanisms and there's many examples of this, which some of the agencies have worked on that can help, see how this can actually contribute to.
Yeah, in the case of my country, first there must be a problem. That's the most important. And in order to identify the problem, all the communities go a rigorous planning process. You convene a meeting, you tell them about this opportunity, and then you form a small group of community members plus the village government. They walk around, transect walk around and see how the environment or what other problems are there. They draw them up, community map. They identify key issues impacting their lives. They do a kind of visioning that, okay, in future, we would like this community to be like this and this and this. So what should be done? They identify the problem and prioritize them. That, okay, here the problem is firewood. In order to address this, then we need to plant trees. So there must be a problem and a solution. So for your case that people are not willing to work, then that is a special case, because you need to use the labor, the person days, who are going to be paid to create an asset for the community. In some countries, like in Africa, they even do the fodder farming. There's fodder, for the animals. Area closure. So there are so many public works, as Mito said. In some places in Tanzania, they're even making a road using stones in uphill areas where there are a lot of stones. In Nepal, for example, you can use stones and make a road so that the motorcycle can just pass without any problem. So there are so many public works programs which you can do, but there must be a problem. And the community has to be involved right from the planning, identification of the problem, do the budgeting and everything, so that the community's beneficiaries, they have to work to solve the problem. So it can be an asset that belongs to the entire community, but it can be asset also belong to themselves. For example, in Tanzania, because we came to realize that most of the assets that are being constructed are community needs, like roads, ponds, and so forth. So we advocate, okay, you construct a road, but then you do some kind of field farm schools together with the other intervention. So the field farm schools enable the beneficiary to gain more skills in agriculture production so that they address food for security. So, well, I think we have answered your question. Yeah. So, yeah, for the case of this now ISPA, one of the issues I think, if you have seen, is the data collection. You need to, it takes a lot of time to get the data. And in some countries like mine, there is only one agency which is responsible for data upkeep. That's the National Bureau of Statistics. But also we need to collect data at the ministry level to know the status of maybe nutrition, education, and so forth. You also need to collect data at the district level, even at the community level. So it's a rigorous, time-consuming activity. For our case, it took about 3 months to complete this until when they produced the country report. But the other area, which if you have seen, there are so many recommendations, and you cannot address all of them at once. You have to go one by one. Some of them you have to make a dialogue. Some of them you need external support to implement, like the training and capacity building. They are always very expensive, so you have to write a proposal or seek some other financial institution to support some of the recommendations that have been. For example, in our case, you have seen that the local service providers didn't have enough capacity to supervise the support, because these are some of the individual persons. I mean, most of them have gone up to secondary school. They didn't go beyond that one. So when you are talking of composite manure, he knows nothing. So it's a question of building the capacity in order to implement the sub-project which you are going to do. So for our case, we got a support from other donors to train them for at least 6 days. And we are also being supported to translate the technical manual. So you can see you have to do this with a lot of support from other development partners. Otherwise, I think it's a very nice tool to ensure that you see how best you are faring in terms of each of the criteria that has been listed. Yeah.
Just to add to that last point about, that there's several recommendations and certain things that, from as part of the lessons learned that they want to make, that they want to contribute to making the program better. And that requires funding. And as Barnabas mentioned, in this case of the training and the materials, basically it was ILO that had funding from one of the donors for other work that we had in other parts of Africa, which we actually then negotiated that, seeing the recommendations from an ISPA assessment, which is interagency. And it shows that there's an interagency consensus, that these are some of the areas that the TASAF program could actually benefit from doing further training or translation of material and so forth. It allowed us to justify that some of the resources also be considered for this program. And I think that's also the beauty of ISPA, is that you're talking about a tool that is actually bringing all these different partners with different mandates and perspectives together to come to a consensus, to have criteria in each of these program tools. So not just public works, but there's food security, cash transfers will come. So there's different tools. So we'll have this expert view on a certain topic. At the same time, you also have donors. So we have development partners, like in the case of the public works, there's EU, GIZ, DFAT, and others who have been involved in the development and who are also involved in some of these programs and in terms of future financing. And this is where donors can then also come together to then consider some of these programs that have clear and concise recommendations of what needs to be done, and to try to put the funding there rather than creating another project that may not have been assessed. So I think these are the kind of benefits that also come out of this interagency work, if that makes sense. So I think with that, I don't know if there's any questions. If you have any questions for us, we're happy to take them. If anything is still not clear, or if you're interested in knowing how to. Everything was clear?
As I mentioned actually before the question, integrating cash for work or labor market program with social protection is very challenging, particularly on the coordination and the financing. So how Tanzania, what are the challenges in your country in terms of putting together all the CCTs, all these child grant program or other program with cash forward program? That's my first question. My second question is, how much that size of the benefit in total that received by the family? Yeah. Yeah. No, per year or per family that has an impact on reducing poverty, because if we are able to consolidate the program like what you have in the example, the impact of the poverty might be quite significant. This is one thing that sometimes the government say, I have so many programs, why the poverty level doesn't really budge from the existing one. So if you have any of those information.
Okay, the first one was on coordination. Okay, okay. For our case, the Tanzania Social Action Fund is an independent organization under the President's office. So there is a very high support from the government. But we are also working with the ministries responsible for different health, education, social protection. There is a ministry responsible for labor, for example, employment. So all those ministries. So yeah, but then we are an organization that is working. In fact, TASAF has been tasked with the poverty reduction, because the ministries are developing policies. Now, how the policies are being put in place, that's where the government formed this Tanzania Social Action Fund. Initially, it started as a social fund to support communities in constructing infrastructure, but then it has been transformed into a social protection agency. So both cash transfer, conditional cash transfer, livelihood, but also there are other programs like most vulnerable children, old age pension. It's about to start very soon. They will not be under us. We are only addressing household with the poor household, with the administering with the cash transfer, conditional cash transfer, and public works. So that's not a problem. But then one thing which is very important, and it could help you, is to have a national social protection framework or policy or law, whatever. Because that one, the one which we are developing in the country now, is cutting across all. Contributory, that is like me, I'm contributing to a social, to the security fund. But also the non-contributory, which is the social protection side of it. Under it, there are a lot of them, including public works and cash transfer and non-cash transfer. So the coordination mechanism is there, and there is a task force. There is a task force from ministries that is responsible to see all these kind of intervention.
Let me just add. So another example is, for example, South Africa. So South Africa, the public employment program policy or mandate has come from the highest level. It's in the expanded public works program, which is working on labor-based approaches, basically cuts through the 4 ministries. And I think it's gone through, because it's had time to mature, it's gone through it has evolved in different ways. But the EPWP was actually ministry work. So Ministry of Environment has been doing water, working for water, working for fire, has many of these environmental programs that have been there since the 1990s. Okay, and then Ministry of Infrastructure may have its road work and other types of construction work. So each of the sectors was doing what they normally do, like in many of your countries. But the difference was that it was mandated at the highest level to have this expanded public works program that is gathering data all the way from the bottom up. So they're able to assess this, in a way that targets, with the different targets that they have on youth, disability, and women, to be able to then assess the impacts of the programs. So I think it very much depends. Some countries are probably still challenged by this, even though they've have national employment programs. But in other countries, I think this having some sort of coordination body that is above or on the side, but that actually people report to, or vice versa, that allows this cross-ministerial coordination, can be very helpful. So I think it very much depends.
Coordination is paramount important. Without that, then everything collapses. The other area is about the benefit. For the public works I mentioned, it's about 1.3 of a dollar times 60, that is comes to 81 for 4 months, because that one is done in 4 months. For the conditional cash transfer, basic transfer, is about $5 a month for all the household, and it's being paid on bi-monthly basis. So 5 times 12, that is about 60. And then the condition now, condition is depending on the number of children you have in the household, the one going to school, under 5, but on average, 60 and 81, that is 140, maybe $200 per year. Yeah, per year. Politicians normally see this quite little money. But when we go to the village, they say, Allah, thank you. Yeah, because it has never been done before. So something, it's better. And they are doing a lot of savings. In one of the districts which I visited, what they are doing is they form a group of maybe 10 to 15, and then after every payment, they collect the money, certain amount of money, and give it to this guy. He goes and then buy corrugated iron sheet, bedding materials, goat, sheep, chicken, whatever, and then the next round until when they complete merry-go-round.
Any initiative about establishing social enterprise in Tanzania?
Social enterprise, I mean, we have a component on livelihood. We are providing support to each beneficiary on basic saving skills, and then support them with the entrepreneurship skills. In fact, and that is the graduation model we are developing. In fact, we are working with anybody from Bangladesh? BRAC model. And there is another organization in Colombia, Fundación Capita. We are also working with 2 organizations. In fact, they have opened office in Tanzania and Dar es Salaam. So we are working, actually they are part of the development partners. Although they don't contribute money, but they have the skills. So we are working with the BRAC, we are working with Foundation. We are developing now a model for graduation.
So otherwise, all is good? No more questions? Okay. So I was asked to also announce that at 7 o'clock, we will be meeting by the poolside for the, I don't know if it's a dinner or a cocktail. I'm assuming you don't have to come in your bathing suit. I'm assuming. No, but it's dinner by the poolside at 7 o'clock. So if you'd like to take some time, I think we're finishing maybe slightly early, so this gives you a chance to rest and then join us at 7. So on behalf of the organizing team, thank you very much. Verónica, lo del survey, hay un survey, ¿no? Para la evaluación. Oh.
Please rate us. Don't forget to check in this session and rate us with the stars, please. Oh, and so since you guys don't have questions, we have questions for you. So if you go to the session, we have some polling. Do you want to?
No, so sorry. We have 10 more minutes, and I forgot. We have a little bit more homework for you. So there's some questionnaires. So there's 2 things. One is we would really appreciate you evaluating us so that we can do better next time. So that you can do through the application when you get back to your rooms. But now we have just 5 questions, 5 simple questions, and they're takeaways that we want you to take with you. So let us go through those questions if we can. If they're in your application, you need to vote so that we can see your response. So if you go into, what was it? You go into the application and you go into schedule, and you choose the Public Works Tool Clinic at 3. Then you will see at the bottom there's a poll. So if you could click on the poll, you should get the first question with 3 answers. So if you could all do that now, please, because we want to see the answers on the screen. Sorry, I got your hopes up. Okay, if you don't have, okay, no, it's okay. For those that have it. Done? Okay, so the question, okay, so we don't have to go over the question. Everyone got the question correct. Let's go to so the main 3 objectives of Public Works is income, jobs, and assets or service creation. So if we go to the second question, which is name 3 assessment criteria under the ISPA tool framework. So you've done 1 of the 5, but there's 8 assessment criteria in the Public Works. So if you can name 3 of them. It's coming through though. I can see the results. Okay. So 73% answered the first one, targeting conditions of work, coherence of programs, and 33%, okay, 67 and 30, lesser amount, has chosen targeting gender equality, asset creation. Which do you think is right? Do you go with the majority or do you go with the 33%? No, the answer is the first one. And the reason is gender equality is also addressed, of course, through the assessments, but we don't have a specific assessment on gender. So third question, why is it important to use the ISPA tool? Is it to assess the strengths and gaps of programs? Is it to evaluate how much funding is required to upscale the program? Or is it to assess how social protection has contributed to public works? Okay, so ideas differ. What do you think? The answer is A. It's actually, the program is set out to address where the strengths are and the gaps are. That might actually help funding in the long run, and it might assess how social protection has contributed to public works, but what the assessment is doing is assessing the strengths and weaknesses of the program. Next question, what are the main processes that need to be followed in the application of the tool? Oh, everyone's answered, so yes. Oh, no. Okay, no, people are still answering. What do you think? Who said A? The answer is B. The government has to somebody just changed their answer. Okay, let me move on to. Okay, so mention 3 of the stakeholders that need to be involved in the ISPA tool. Who have to be there? Just if you can answer on your. What do you think? Is there not another one? Yeah, it's strange there's a third one missing. Has everybody answered? Okay, so basically here, the important thing is the word beneficiaries. They need to be part of the assessment. Of course, government officials, it's important. You will always have the consultants and the interagencies, but what is important is to ensure that your beneficiaries are part of the process. Yep. So with that, thank you very much. So those were some of the key takeaways that we'd like you to, leave this room with. So thanks a lot. Oh, and then please fill out the evaluation when you get back to your rooms. It doesn't have to be now.